What's the quickest you've ever seen a new coworker get fired? A guy refusing to wear safety gear/PPE on his first day. He flat out said no to the supervisor, who then fired him. He didn't even make it to the first coffee break. If he was that adamant about not wearing safety gear, it wasn't a good sign. Story 2. Kid came in on his first day thinking he could boss everyone around. Since he just finished culinary school, strike 1. Caught him later that day, vaping in the prep area of the kitchen, strike 2. He asked on his second day if he could leave for 30 minutes to make a substances deal. Needless to say, that was strike 3. Story 3. Back in the mid-1990s, I had hired a guy for senior Unix systems administration role. It was made quite clear in the posted job description, the interview process, and on his first day that this role would be required to be on call a few nights per month on a rotating basis with the other Unix admins. The salary reflected that as well. This was a 6-figure position. He was issued a company laptop and a cell phone for his on-call work that could be done from home. As part of the onboarding process, our Unix lead admin wanted this guy to shadow him on his on-call evening so that he could see how processes differed in the off hours. It was his second day on the job. That evening, I happened to be working a bit late, and the help desk calls me saying they've got an issue that needs to be escalated to the Unix team and asking if they've got the right number for the new guy because it's just ringing and going to a default voicemail mailbox. I tell them to call the lead admin to get him working on the issue and that I'll contact the new guy myself. I call, same thing, voicemail, multiple times. I fish out his employment docs that are all still sitting on my desk and find his home phone number. I call and get about 3 words out of my mouth when he responds, "Why the duck are you calling me at home?" and hangs up. A bit in disbelief, I look back at the paperwork and verify, yes, this asterisk is asterisk his phone number and try it again, thinking maybe he'd mistaken me for someone else. I receive a similar bit of vitriol and a hang-up. I contact the lead admin and inform him he won't be having the new guy join him that night or any other. We immediately killed all of his system access and his door card, and HR was waiting for him at the reception area first thing in the morning. Story 4. Within the first 2 hours of training with me, she asks where she can go and have a smoke. I tell her just outside there's a smoking area. She proceeds to walk outside in front of all the supervisors and openly smokes. She got walked out 5 minutes later. Story 5. Worked at a place where you couldn't be colorblind because you were reading schematics and identifying connectors of varying different colors. There was hundreds of tiny connectors in one array. Somehow, this guy got hired. Either they forgot to implement the CB test, or he successfully guessed his way through it. He trains for a week and is put onto the line to build $20,000 cables for ducking missiles. His very first connector he spent all day on, soldering and connecting and signing the paperwork and the steps, gave it to QC for inspection. It was one of the most ducked-up examples of a connector anyone had seen. Next day, guy admits he's colorblind and whether he can keep the job. He's let go because he cost the company $20,000. The connector was put on display in our hour to drive home the importance of sticking to hiring procedures. Story 6. Hired my friend's sister as a hostess at our restaurant. She called off for her first shift 3 hours later, telling me that she was having a tough period. 30 minutes into her dinner shift, she started posting pics on Instagram of her being at a party in Canada. We live in NY. Fired her via Insta. Never even worked. Then tried to claim unemployment. Then had her father call me and try to threaten me into rehiring here. She was 34. Story 7. When I worked in data entry, there was a tricycle on our office floor, just added as a relaxed bit of fun by the managers, who were all very chill people. One of the girls that got hired around the same time as me would, instead of working, just ride the tricycle around the office all day, every day. When we all showed up in the morning, she wouldn't even log into her computer. She would just get right on the tricycle and ride around talking to people until she left to take her lunch break the day she got fired. She had to be escorted out of the building because she was screaming about, "You're targeting me unfairly." Story 8. This guy shows up, the VP is gloating how great and brilliant he is, blah, blah, blah. First day, doesn't come in until 10 a.m. Next day, same deal, like working from 10 to 12, then leaving. Meanwhile, they flew him on a business trip leaving Wednesday and supposed to come back Friday. At the last second, he rebooked himself on a midnight flight. Meanwhile, on the Friday flight back at the last second, he was like, "Oh, I have to take a different flight," and he just disappeared. What Mr. Mysterious didn't realize is most of us used to work at his previous employer. Someone sent us a text, "Hey, I thought you hired blah, blah, blah. He's making copies right now." Turns out he was working 2 jobs. These are both science/tech companies with not that strict NDAs, but you can't work at a potential competitor simultaneously. He was fired from both jobs. Story 9. Orientation second day. He's to sit in a conference room and read through binders of important info. Our boss walks out and closes the door. It has a window with blinds open to see through. Going about our day, and the boss asks us, Why the conference door's locked and blinds closed? Nobody is sure, so they get security to open the door to see this ducking guy kicked back with the lights off asleep. He had closed the blinds and locked the door. Of course he was out there that day. Story 10. Small family company that, in my lifetime, 34 years, went from 3 to 80 employees. One woman has been there 30 years and almost feels like a family member. Her daughter struggled with mental issues, and in therapy it came out that she had been abused. Others corroborated the story, because it was never an official charge. That's the type of thing that doesn't show up on a background check. A few years pass, her daughter goes to college, meets a great guy, gets engaged, her life is going well. And I hire a new warehouse worker. I'm doing his onboarding and bring him to the office for introduction. The mom's face drops. She pulls me aside. I had hired the abuser. I told him an unforeseen conflict had come up and I wouldn't contest unemployment. Those are the types of situations they don't really prepare you for in management. Story 11. Law enforcement agency, dispatcher trainee hired as a favor to their parent, who was friends with the head of the agency. Guy, who was already annoying, bragged and showed off that he was sexting, even showing it to sworn officers. Went quickly from employee to client. Story 12. We hired an IT guy who was just, well, weird. Didn't seem to do much, but was always out and about taking to people. Whatever, not my department. Then I heard he got fired. He was asked to help the CEO with his computer. The guy walked into the executive offices, acted weird and like he knew everyone, rude and inappropriate to the secretaries. Then walked into the CEO's office and took one look at his computer and said, "No wonder. It's not working. Macs are crap." Spent 10 minutes ripping into the CEO about his poor choice of computer and complaining about his job. Then got asked to leave. Never saw him again after that. Story 13. I worked on an IT helps desk. It was me and another guy. He quit because there was no room for growth. They hired this guy who supposedly had 25 years of experience in it. I was tasked with training this guy. He was an older guy and was so deaf he couldn't hear the phone ringing. I had to show him how to do the same things over and over again, like how to install a printer. I even made training documentation, but instead of reading that, he would just ask me to show him. He was a high school football coach on the side, and that's all he talked about. After a week, I went to the boss and said, "This guy is useless to me." The boss sat with him for 2 hours at his desk, and he was fired the next day. I felt bad the guy lost his job, but he was not absorbing any info, and I was doing 2 jobs. Story 14, day 4 of orientation. I got hired onto a trucking company after CDL school. They had 5 days of orientation, and it took place at their headquarters that was several states away. You could either have them fly you there, or you could drive yourself, and they would cover your expenses. Also, the company would put you up at a hotel, pay your food costs, and provide transportation to the headquarters. I didn't even think it was possible to get fired at orientation. All you have to do is show up and pretend to pay attention. This one guy drove himself there. I think he lived about 800 miles away. On the first day of orientation, he tells anyone who will listen that he forgot to keep his receipts and he better get reimbursed. I think I'd rather eat the cost than announce to everyone how stupid I am. On the second day, he slept in and missed the shuttle and ended up driving himself. On the third day, he missed the shuttle, yet again, and was over an hour late. Worse than that, he fell asleep during orientation. I knew he was done for when the instructor angrily woke him up and asked for his full name. On day 4, he showed up on time, but his fate was sealed. When I was at the hotel later that night having a cigarette, I saw him loading his stuff into his car. I asked him what happened and, yep, got canned. I can't say I blame them. I'll be the first to admit that trucking isn't the hardest job, but being on time, paying attention, and getting adequate rest are very big keys to success. They probably made the right move. I felt bad for the guy, though. He essentially drove 800 miles to get fired and then drove 800 miles back. That had to feel like a long trip. Story 15. I worked a mall job in the 1990s at electronics boutique. Pokemon had just come out, and we got this new guy for Christmas help who was just the strangest person ever. His first shift, he just sat behind the counter, opening up packs of Pokemon cards, and when confronted, he yelled, "I am going to pay for them." Duh. He was walked out by the manager about 15 seconds later. That was a really dumb kid. Story 16. I warned them not to hire her. She worked at a bank, and 2 weeks after opening an account for my son, she looked him up on Facebook and sent him a friend request. He doesn't even know her. Now she was applying for a job at a high school. Day 1 after work, threw a party with said high schoolers, fired. I warned them. Story 17. I work in a government archives facility. The new guy brought food into the work area on his first day, even though there are signs everywhere saying you can only eat in the break room. And it's just common sense. But the boss gave him the benefit of the doubt and just gave him a warning. A couple of days later, he was eating at his desk again. Bye-bye. Don't know if he was arrogant or just an airhead, but he definitely didn't need to be around the 18th century documents. Story 18. First shift, he immediately started following the girls around and inviting them over to his house or to give them rides. Fired that day. Thank God management took it seriously for once. Story 19. Guy came in and got certified on the first half of the job. We put him in a forklift for part 2, and he went to his car on break. Came back drunk to the point of being obvious. That's when I found out we have a breathalyzer on site. Great part. They made him call a friend for a ride. They drove out of sight, immediately turned around and came back. Dude sprinted into our parking lot and drove his car away. We had to call the cops because he technically left work in a vehicle while drunk. Story 20. I work in a kitchen, and literally just yesterday, new guy start at 5 a.m., claims to have 20+ years experience, gets frustrated that he is struggling with some basic recipes, slams the oven door and breaks it, then walked out at 6:30 a.m. I would be lying if I said I haven't witnessed this more than once at all the different places I've cooked at. Story 21. I used to work as a deckhand for a tugboat company on the Mississippi River. The amount of people that would take jobs like that who were deathly afraid of water was staggering. There was a mandatory 2-week training period for all new employees, but about 1/3 of them never made it past their first week. One second you're on a boat heading to your first job, and then the new guy is freaking out telling the captain to turn the boat around and head back to the dock. Story 22. Years back, I worked a ski season in Europe. They bus the staff all the way out to the Alps from London via the Channel Ferry. All in all, about 18 hours transit. It's not unusual for everyone to enjoy themselves and get a bit merry, as long as you don't cross the line. One chap gets absolutely bladdered, ends up getting aggressive, attempts to fight a couple of his new colleagues, and ends up passed out in his seat with puke all down him. We finally arrive at the resort, and as we're getting off the bus, the regional manager tells him to stay put and not to bother taking his bags off. New driver gets on, and off he goes, straight back to London with 18 hours to think about how bad he ducked up. Story 23. A few days, the guy turned his camera on during a company-wide Zoom meeting at 10 a.m. and was laying in bed. Not even sitting up, he was laying down on a pillow, no shirt on, holding his phone above him. The crazy part was, you didn't actually have to have your video on. They are optional in these meetings. 90% of the company keeps them off. His response to all this was that he was never told what our working hours are. They were 8 to 4, bud, and if there is a company-wide meeting scheduled, probably safe to assume it's considered working hours. Story 24. Worked at Best Buy, and around 2010, we hired for the holiday season. I think it was his second day, and I was organizing games on the bottom shelf, and he came up to me and said, "Hey, check this out," and bounced up and down. I started hearing a clapping noise, like clap, 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 literally no idea how, but his balls were making that clapping noise. This was at my face level too, since I was kneeling down. Being a 20-year-old dude, part of me thought it was horrifying. The other hilarious in a what the duck is this actually happening kind of way. But apparently he went around and did it to everyone, and some girls reported him for harassment, and he was fired fairly quickly. I've tried to recreate it throughout my life, but I have no idea how the guy did it. He was young. The clapping was so loud. Story 25. I ran the college onboarding software developer group for a large telecom. The first day onboarding was with HR and health insurance /401k etc. All that really mundane stuff. I would sit in the back of the room and watch to see the incoming group to see how they react to corporate life. 1. Guy asked HR person how soon they get promoted. Said that the person that hired him said it would be within 2 weeks, and he would be a director within a few months. I hired him. He was sent home before the first coffee break at 10 a.m. 2. Girls started hitting on the other guys in the room, like flirting beyond anything I've ever seen. Offered one guy a BJ. She lasted till lunch. 3. So many drunk I can't count or remember them all. Story 26. His first day of training, he was hired to be an assistant manager. He told the manager training him that he wasn't going to do what she was showing him because that was woman's work. And he wouldn't be a hands-on manager because that's what the employees were for. He was only there to supervise. He only made it 2, maybe 3 hours into the shift before she lost it on him and told him to go home. Story 27. I had a douche bartender on his training shift get fired in the first hour. A couple customers, as soon as we opened, made cocktails for them and one for himself, while the bar manager was standing next to him, on camera. And the owner's sister was the customer. Story 28. I worked for an anime website aimed at young teens. On his first day at work, a new engineer mentioned to our ET guy that there was some monitoring software he had to install on his work laptop. Turns out, he was a convicted for CP. He hadn't disclosed any of this in his job app or interviews. Got walked out the door instead of getting his laptop. Story 29. New guy, cannabis farm, asked about smoking at lunch. I gave him the spiel. It's against the state rules, and if I can tell you're high, it's a big problem. Otherwise, it's none of my business. After lunch, I saw him in the field, leaning on his shovel. Okay, we all need to take a rest now and then. 5 minutes later, I check and he hasn't moved. Well, it's his first day and it's hot out. 10 minutes. same position and location. Tried talking to him and got incoherent mumbling. Turns out he was high story 30. Worked in a shop that turned big glass sheets into shower enclosures, panels for balconies, etc. New guy had been there for about 30 minutes. Just enough time to go through the orientation that explains how to properly carry glass, where to put your hands, how to pick it up and set it down without breaking it and hurting yourself. Guy is carrying a shower door when he realizes he forgot something at the previous station. So he stops on a dime and does a 180, not an approved maneuver from the orientation as one might imagine, and slams the glass right into a rack that is holding a bunch of untempered shower doors. Door in his hand splits in two, leaving a deep gash in his palm, and some of the doors on the rack also break, dropping huge swords of glass all around him. He was lucky just to have his hand hit. His hand was bandaged, and he was out the door shortly after, bound for a hospital to get stitches. Never saw him again after that. Story 31. Not my coworker, but a friend. His job had hired a new lifeguard for an indoor water park. Turns out the guy couldn't swim and almost passed during training before the outdoor pools opened during summer. Story 32. 2 days after he was hired, this dude took a nap under his desk at like 10 a.m. He was like 6 feet 5 inches and his legs stuck out into the aisle. CEO walked by, shook his head in disbelief, and the dude was gone by noon. Story 33. Bro accidentally put refried beans in the soft serve ice cream machine. Customers were like, why are there beans in my chocolate soft serve? The entire machine had to be taken out of service and worked on. Story 34. Used to work at a doggy daycare. New guy failed to show up for a couple shifts. Apparently called the owner incredibly drunk, apologized for being unable to come in, then started confessing his love for the owner. Never saw him again. One of the wildest reasons I've ever seen a coworker fired. Story 35. A new hire PC repair tech, whose resume came with 6 years experience. I handed him an installation CD for Windows XP, instructed him to format and reload the 3 desktop computers on the bench in front of him, and he just looked at me like a deer in headlights. He was gone before morning break. Story 36. 3 days. He was a slob. Belly out, ooed burping, telling people when he was going for a crap, not doing anything about it when told. Gone. A week for another who left after being told by the manager to shower and wash his clothes. Story 37. Once knew ARN who didn't show up for her first day. Turns out she was in jail. The night before, she had gotten drunk, got into a fight with her boyfriend, and hit him with her car. He was life-flighted out and lost leg. His family hated her. He was a farmer that she'd met on Farmers Only dating site. She was fired before she ever made it to her first day. Afterwards, she would sneak into the hospital to see him because his family had her banned from visiting. The day he had to have his second leg amputated, she told him she was seeing someone else. She told me she was going to marry this new guy, and her mother was furious because he was her mother's former fiancé. This is a true story. I never spoke to her again, as I was too afraid to let this hurricane near my family. Story 38. I had a job at a car dealership. There was a guy who on his first day we asked him to run across the street to pick up our pizza order. He carried the pizza box sideways under his arm like you'd carry a book. When we opened the box up, it was smushed. Got fired that day. Story 39. Dude was doing a tour of the plant when security escorted him to the main lobby where the police were picking him up on a warrant. He never even made it to the new hire orientation. Story 40. 3 days. We hired a new special ed teacher at our school. She just seemed like a normal mom type. On day 2, she wrote me an email saying she had a dirty dream about me. I hadn't even been introduced to her yet. After I responded with some sort of politically correct response, she came up later that day in the hallway I was standing in and quickly squeezed my junk. I talked with my superior about what I should do about this, and she just said, I'll take care of it. The next day, the whole staff gets an email saying the new teacher had to leave permanently for personal reasons. I later got a follow-up email apology from her saying she had just gotten divorced and didn't know what came over her. Story 41. Trained a guy in for 2 weeks as an aircraft fueler. He gets signed off and I go on my weekend. I get back to work and the first comment I hear is, what did you do to your trainee? Apparently, he was coming down off of Xanax and acid. He was fueling the wrong flights, putting not enough fuel in them. Then he proceeded to fall asleep on the couch while drooling. Brought him to the office twice. Last time they handed him a piss cut, and what he gave them was cold and clear. They watched him the next time, and he dipped the cup in the toilet and handed it to them. Fired. Story 42. Company hired security, and part of that function was to drive a van of employees to a parking lot to pick up their cars after a long day of work. First run out, it's apparent he has no idea how to drive and proceeds to crash into several parked cars on the street. Story 43. I had one of the dirtiest jobs in the world in the late 90s. Officially, it was an industrial cleaning company, but it was really the first circle of hell. It was called Onyx, Does your steel mill have a 2-foot-thick coating of metal shavings on its rafters above an active iron smelter, like something out of Terminator 2? Need some poor schmuck with no real training to lug a bulky, heavy vacuum hose up there to suck the shavings all up because it's starting to weigh your roof down too much? Is it about 3 stories above an open smelter that's got glowing red magma in it? Well, glad you called the company I used to work for, so I could get paid $9 an hour to risk my life to do it for you. Imagine crawling around on a 2-foot-wide beam while fighting with a heavy and awkward hose, with not so much as a safety rope, above a certain agonizing death. And now your hands are sweating so bad they're slipping around in your gloves. That wasn't the day someone got fired on their first day and I quit. That day was spent after the day before working a 24-hour shift at Baltimore Resco, the city's trash burning plant, where every disgusting thing from every abominable dumpster in Baltimore ended up to be burned to heat an 8-story boiler to generate electricity. Fleets of trash trucks all day and night, dumping their disgusting loads out onto what was known then as the kill, a massive concrete slab, floor as big as a football field, where a giant, megalithic bulldozer pushed it into a giant machine that ground it up and sent it to be burned. Except the kill hadn't been used the day before or today, because today we got to clean it. Me and 3 other unlucky a-holes from our company had to systematically walk the entire kill in a grid pattern to pressure wash up a half-foot of clay like trash slime that had fossilized to the concrete over time under the enormous weight of the massive dozer treads. Even through our masks, the smell was indescribably awful. The ground had the feeling of ice with slime on top. We had to fight hard to keep our footing, which is why we were doing the cleaning. To do this, we were using incredibly powerful pressure washers called shotguns due to their explosive concussive power. I had just been using them the day before on my hellish shift inside that 8-story boiler that had been cooling for a week prior. The shotguns could blow your foot clean off, as shown in the training video we had watched. It could also blow off the concrete, like buildup of burnt trash off of the hot water pipes inside the boiler, which I'd done for 24 hours straight the day before cleaning the kill. The worst part was the rats, and the $9 an hour. The mountains of trash building up around the now empty kill had a city's worth of rats running around in it. Sometimes, as trucks disgorged more trash on top of them from ramps above, it would cause a flurry of scared rats out from under and onto the kill. Sometimes, in their fear, they'd run right at you, groups at a time. We were instructed to blow them back with the shotgun. It was the only way to keep them off you. If you lost your footing and went down to their level, well, keep your footing. After 11 hours of that, I got to go back to a crafty motel room, where a new guy just hired that day was supposed to be going back to fill in. When I opened my motel room door, I see a very overweight, hairy, drunk guy standing at the foot of my bed totally naked. He's clearly drunk as crap, swaying back and forth as he pisses all over my bed and suitcase. I shut the door, told my boss in the truck that I quit and had to wait 12 hours for a ride back home. And the guy was fired for spending his first night before work getting blackout drunk in the shared hotel room. Story 44. I was working at a big telecom company with headquarters in the Northeast in a small town. The town had a couple nice hotels and restaurants that worked in conjunction with our company whenever we had events or large training groups coming in, so both parties were well acquainted with one another. At our annual kickoff event, there was a cohort of new hires who started the same week. One guy in sales shows up on Wednesday for his first day and proceeds to get very drunk at the evening cocktail hour. I saw him hit on a few people and get pretty sloppy, but figured he would get to his room and would only suffer the consequences of a hangover and his shame. Apparently that was wrong, as he got separated from everyone, stumbles back to the hotel, goes into the kitchen and gets undressed, then passes out on a prep table. He woke up to the general manager of the hotel and several execs from this publicly traded company standing over him and trying to get him clothed out of the kitchen. Dude was canned the next morning, obviously. Story 45 had a guy quit on his first day. He was hired for the dev team, and his first day happened to coincide with an all-company meeting. He shows up and at the meeting is eyeing one of the on-site techs. This tech is 5 feet nothing, an all-around great guy. And the new guy was close to 5 feet 10 inches, but he was just staring nervously at him. After the meeting, the new employee asks his supervisor questions about the on-site tech, like how long he had been there, what his job was, etc. He left for lunch and then never returned. Turns out that this new guy was the man that the on-site tech's wife cheated with and broke up their marriage like a decade before. Apparently, the on-site tech found him at a bar shortly after finding out and unleashed his 5-foot fury on him, beating the tar out of him. The on-site tech is remarried and has kids now and says he doesn't care anymore. But that munchkin beating he laid down had some lasting psychological effects on the new guy, I guess. Story 46. I worked in a grocery store in the coffee kiosk, and we had just gotten a new hire. She said she'd worked in the coffee shop before and was highly qualified, which was what got her the position. So we went through her training and I asked if she wanted to try making a few drinks while it was dead for the refresher. She was cocky and said of course. I thought maybe she was just super rusty as she looked lost and confused with the drinks I was asking her to make. Maybe she was nervous. She refused to sit with the training books because she was qualified. And again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt because I'm a hands-on learner. Maybe she was too. So I put her on drip coffee and dishes. She ended up breaking the hot water spigot on the drip coffee maker and didn't tell anyone. Just kept filling up cups and dumping it. She went on her break and all of a sudden, even with mats, the floor became a slippery disaster. We had to shut the maker off to get it to stop, and when no one fessed up to breaking the spigot, I went to the office to ask the store manager to look at the cams on our kiosk. She was on camera, not only breaking the spigot, but on her break, right then opening different items in the store, eating it, and then putting the item back on the shelf. The manager took her into the office to let her know her shift was over, and she was being terminated. She screamed her way out of the store, needing an escort. Turns out it was her first job, and she thought you could just eat from the store on break. Story 47, not a coworker, but an intern. He arrived 45 minutes late, but was given a chance until the cops arrived 15 minutes later because he had been speeding the entire way here and they had been after him. I work in a childcare facility. Story 48. We hired someone at the recommendation of another employee. After a day at the central office going over and signing off on all of our employment policies, their first day in the site ended up being a day we had a meeting. Our regional director came to make a point about something at a staff meeting and arrived 20 minutes or so before the meeting to greet everyone. They meet the new guy. New guy goes about doing some work. Meeting begins. New guy uses the restroom before we start. After going over a topic or two, the regional director wants to talk but asks where the new guy is. Me and another employee go looking around the site, and the bathroom he was in is empty. The window is wide open, screen popped out, and a weed pipe left on the windowsill with a lighter. Both still pretty warm. This moffer met the regional director, went to the bathroom to get high, then got scared he'd be caught by the smell while sitting at the meeting, and instead hopped out the upstairs window, ran out the back, climbed a fence, ran through someone else's yard, climbed another fence through, and circled the block back to his car and never came back. I know all of that because a coworker and I knew the girl he was dating at the time. She left him for doing this because she was the one that reached out to my coworker to get him recommended hired because he kept getting fired for smoking weed at jobs. Story 49, about 3 hours. She started the same day as me, and partway through the morning I started telling a few jokes. She then said, "I've got a good one," and proceeded to reel off a string of really awful jokes. She went for lunch and didn't come back. I presume someone caught her on the way. OJT Story 50, about 2 hours. Was training a new security guard for a pretty simple location truck stop. As I showed him the patrol route and explained what to do for common issues, he's singing just the chorus of White Wedding the entire time. We get back to our post and he starts chewing tobacco and spitting it on the road. Our client's manager on duty tells him to knock it off and he tells him, "Eat crap, I don't work for you." Kid was about 20, driving a lifted F-150 with smokestacks and a Confederate flag on it. No idea how he afforded it since we all made $12 an hour. Also, the kicker, we're in New England and he and his entire family were from Maine. He'd never even been south of the Mason-Dixon, I asked. He was gone about 15 minutes later when my supervisor got on site. Story 51. I actually fired a guy who showed up 2 hours late, then while apologizing, asked if he could leave early. "Yeah, bud, you can actually leave right now." He didn't think I could do that because I was only 20-something, and his dawning horror, as the store manager explained, I was, in fact, manager of that department, was pretty sad to see. "You were told to report to me, my dude. Why would you think I don't have authority because I'm young?" It was his first day after being hired, so stop downvoting that guy. He's not wrong. It's not that bad, but it's pretty bad for a very first impression. Story 52. 13 minutes started at 8 a.m. to train. Told his first customer, East Indian, we speak English in this country because he could barely understand him. Fired. Story 53. I worked at a retirement home for a little while as a kid back in the 90s. They hired a new nurse. I think she had to be in her 50s herself. Nice polished lady, as most of the staff were. Part of how she got the job. Well, the residents weren't all polished, or even mostly polished, and they had an old German man who lived there. Really nice guy. On her first shift, she encountered him, called him an idiot, and left the old man in tears right in front of half a dozen of us. Old guy wasn't that or anything bad, so she didn't even make it one shift. That's the record for me. Story 54, 3 days. This new girl wouldn't stop flirting and harassing this guy in my area. My manager loudly told her to stop being a creep and do the job he hired her for because rush hour was starting. She could creep on later. The humiliation made her walk out and never returned. Story 55. He had only been with us 3 days, cleaned up after his mistakes. Customer gave us her food back because it was a little raw. We had been waiting on a replacement oven, say that was normal for us during the week. We would warn customers when they ordered hot meals. This stupid man, he picked up her food and took a big bite that half of it was gone and then gave it back to her. "It is okay, eat it." He called her a name I cannot remember. She was stood in silence. I was frozen, and the customer I was receiving money from was frozen and hiding his laughing. The owner told him to pack and leave, but he would not. Say, the owner picked him up like a toddler by the armpits and carried him outside like a bad cat. Story 56. I was just an apprentice, but we were drilling holes using a mag drill underneath a bridge. New journeyman gets sent out from the hall and is given a brand new Hugin mag drill, a generator, and a couple extension cords. Sets himself up, drills a hole, and decides to go to the bathroom. He leaves his drill magnetized to the steel and goes up top to find the bathroom. On his way, he walks past his generator and decides to turn it off and save gas while he's in the bathroom. As soon as he turns it off, his brand new mag drill drops and goes into the river. He was fired immediately. Story 57. Had a guy that was supposed to be in my training class get fired before training even began. There was about 10 of us that were hired at the same time. Training started Monday morning at 8 a.m. Come Monday, 9 of us showed up. Number 10 was missing. Hiring manager called him and put the call on speakerphone for whatever reason. Perhaps because he's a Redditor and wanted the rest of us to have some content for years down the road. Who knows? Manager asked him if he's running late. New guy says no. I actually submitted an application to a different company last week and I'm hoping they call me back. Do you still want me to come in for training today? Manager. No, don't even bother. You're no longer needed. Story 58. I worked at a Kids Quest daycare center at a casino. Fired someone their first day when she pulled out substances and did a bump right on the floor on the back of her phone. She wasn't supposed to have her phone out. It was against policy. What was I supposed to do? Story 59. We had a hiring agency pulling a bait-and-switch C-1999 to 2000. They figured the company couldn't tell one Indian guy from another, and apparently they were correct up to a point. They had a dummy interviewer who might have been related to the owner. I don't know. Dressed well, handsome, well-spoken thin man who knew his crap. So we hired him. The guy who showed up and he had his ID was completely a different guy. Squat, acne-scarred, wore a linen shirt, khakis, and sandals, barely spoke English. Because of how big our company was, he showed up for orientation on another campus, brought a large hoagie/sub that smelled like vinegar and paprika, propped his dirty, crusty bare feet on the chair in front of him during orientation videos, eating this sandwich, slapped the ass of the head of HR as he passed her in the hallway, was gone for a few hours in the bathroom where apparently he smoked cigarettes. So HR called us to confirm some things, but it was kind of a fishing expedition of, "Are you sure you hired this guy?" Quickly, we said, "No, he was this tall, skinny guy." HR is a bit slow and said that they'd forgive his transgression for today, but we needed to teach him basic American culture or something. I think they were in shock. Guy did not show up for work the next day, then the day after that, showed up to the wrong office. In that time, we found out he was not a US citizen and on a worker's visa or something, which immediately disqualified him for 2 reasons. 1, his proxy lied about this, and 2, US citizenship was a requirement. But now he had a badge to enter our offices and such. And so to get that withheld was another process that required 48 hours notice, but working with building security, we managed to expedite it. On day 4, he was given some training manual and put in a small meeting room. I got to spend some time with him, but I didn't get much out of him because, again, didn't speak much English. He exuded predator creep and was wearing a stained t-shirt with our logo on it, a freebie new hires are given. I visually confirmed this is not the guy we interviewed with. He was asked to leave after we got his badge revoked, and he left without much fuss. Turned out the company had been fooled by 2 other temps this way by this hiring agency, although they weren't giving any issues, so I'm not sure if they got let go or not. HR dropped that hiring agency. Story 60. Our insurance just approved one of our guys to drive solo after he passed all his background checks. He went out, texted all his friends how excited he was. While distracted, he hit a curb overcorrected toward a fence out of a decorative median and hit and totaled a BMW in the other lane. He then lied about what happened. Thankfully, we had very good security footage. That was his 9th day of work. Story 61. I was the driver trainer at Domino's. We had a new guy, just finished training him. He took a run and I knew it was a no-tipper from looking at the address on the screen. I had a book that I wrote down, all the good and bad tip houses. He comes back and says to me, "What do you do when someone stiffs you?" Jokingly, I replied, "Just cut the wheels left and give them a lawn job." He leaves on another crafty run. About 15 minutes later, I see the manager on the phone staring daggers at me. She walks up to me and says, "Did you tell him to do that?" I said, "We were joking and laughing about it." She says, "Well, I just had to fire his stupid ass because he did it." I never caught any grief except a talking to. Story 62. Ran a brew pub for a half a decade, trusted my managers to hire most of the time, so was never part of hiring process. I almost never wore button-ups or anything to differentiate myself from staff, always just in the same branded t-shirt I had my staff wear. I was working a busy evening shift, and a new hire who was off the clock after his second shift was at the bar. I was behind the bar doing glassware for my bartenders and scraping plates into a bus tub. This new server starts making fun of me because I'm wearing baby blue pants, asking if all our bussers is dressed like Mr. Rogers, and saying some borderline homophobic stuff as well. I didn't say anything. He showed up for his shift the next day, and I had cut his final paycheck and met him at the door with it. He said, "Sorry, I didn't know you were the GM. I thought you were just a busser." I let him know that's precisely why he was being let go. He felt it was okay to make fun of a busser just because he was hired as a server. Just was a giant red flag, and I cut that tumor out before it could grow. If he's that comfortable being an idiot on day 2 to our bussers, how's he gonna behave a month in? Story 63, 10 days, worked at a cell phone store. He asked about a special high-end case we had, then took a pink one out back to put aside for his girlfriend. Pretty normal, we all did that for stuff we wanted. Except 3 days later, he had a new pink case on his phone that he was showing off to all the customers. Another newbie who has worked all the days these things occurred noticed and counted the cases and compared them to what inventory said. Surprise, surprise, we were one short. That was the end of that, story 64. I hired this gal who showed up about an hour late for her first shift. When she came in, she said that there was someone that had OD'd in our parking lot and she found them slumped over against a wall, unresponsive. She said that she called 911 and waited for an ambulance to come to make sure the person was taken care of. She described the person as a girl with a yellow dress and said that the police showed up and then some kind of van that wasn't an actual ambulance came and picked the person up, then the cops left. I told her to clock in and head down to her station and that I would review the footage and call the police department to see if there was anything we needed to do to follow up with what happened. I was skeptical of her story because she was acting extremely different than she did during the interview. Her mannerisms and speech gait were that of a tweaker. First thing I did was call the non-emergency dispatch to see if they needed any footage of the incident, and they told me that there had been no dispatch and no 911 call from that area recently. I then looked at the cameras and saw the girl get off the bus an hour late and run across the parking lot to our entrance. Once I had seen that she had concocted this giant stupid-ass story, I went down to her station and asked her to grab her belongings and follow me to the office. I let her know that I called dispatch and that there had been no such incident, and the girl doubled down with the unmarked van statement and said it wasn't actual cops that came but some car from the hospital. I then told her that we have cameras on the exterior of the building and that I watched her get off the bus and run across the parking lot. Showed her the video and she still swore that it happened. If she had just told me that she was sorry and missed the bus, she wouldn't have been fired. I would have given her a chance, but she probably still would have ended up getting fired within a couple days anyway though, told her. Lying ass Matheny lasted 20 minutes. Story 65. One day at work, this guy who worked there for, I think, 2 or 3 days, was told to go and do something. He basically looked at the boss and said, "Nah, I'm not gonna do that. It's too hard." He was told if he couldn't do the work, he would be fired. The guy just sort of shrugged, said, "Guess he was fired," and left. All right, fun one that isn't about being fired, but about someone quitting, maybe. The guy was there for a few months, doing a decent job. One day he says, "Okay, I am going to lunch," goes out, gets in his buddy's car, drives off, never came back for work. Not that day, not that week, not that month, not that year. Never called, never showed back up to explain where he went or why he never came back. We all just assume he quit, but we are still waiting for him to come back from lunch. Story 66. Same day as they were hired. Immediately after training, they proceeded to do exactly what they were told not to do right in front of the supervisor who trained him. He was let go because of safety concerns. Luckily, there wasn't any drama. I don't think he made the mistake intentionally, but I also suspect he didn't want to work there either. Story 67, about 3 hours. New dude was hired to work in the repair shop, computers, printers, and other electronics, where I was working as the only woman in the shop. He decided that he liked my very long hair so much that he came up behind me, fondled my hair, and asked if he could smell it. How about hell no? Went straight to the supervisor, who shrugged it off. So I went to his boss, who shrugged it off, so I went to the boss over both of them. And she had the hair sniffer out the door before lunch. Story 68, not officially hired yet. Taking the competency test for a city job. You have 60 minutes to answer 40 pictures question. What's the easiest way to use the wheelbarrow? Then it shows 3 different pictures. I finished in 15 minutes, redid it again just to be sure. So about 25 minutes to take this test. I glance over at the only other person taking the test, and he's still filing out his name and address. Surprised he wasn't hired as my supervisor. Story 69. He was A in general. One day, he called out. Another day shift server basically got forced to take night shift. Not only did he have the nerve to show up to the bar that night, but when the other server confronted him, he said, "Go suck." I bet he can't believe why he got fired. Story 70, had an IT guy start, and on day one, I told him to get in the server closet and get familiar with all the gear. 30 minutes later, I go in there and he's just kicking back watching Star Trek. Tried giving him his official laptop, and he looked at the brand new Dell and said, "My hands will never touch a Dell laptop." He used his company-issued laptop from his old job. A couple of days later, I would notice he is one of those out-loud laughers when he wants to tell you a story as you walk by. I took the bait and stopped to ask what was so funny. Ducker had his email still from his old company and was reading through trouble tickets for the last few weeks since he left his prior job. A few days after that, our internet takes a crap. I am talking slower than old people ducking. Check around to see if anything seems amiss on our servers. Grab the old trusty hub and connect the ISP and my laptop and fire up Wireshark. I see 99% of the traffic destined for one IP, and it's new guy. He's got some multi-thread FTP client running and downloading a bunch of women weightlifting videos. At this point, management sent me to fire him. That's until we realized the rest of the IT department would all be out in different locations around the US and Europe, and he was our only physical person in the office. So we gave him a warning. 2 weeks later, he sends an email on the second day everyone is out of town to say he found another job and is leaving immediately. He left with the laptop we tried issuing him and about 20 wireless access points, back when they were $1,500 or so apiece. Started his own Wi-Fi company shortly after that with our gear. We should have fired him on day one. Story 71. Lady came in to train for cashiering, obviously high on substances, and spent her breaks on her first day stealing dollar items and putting them in this little shopping bag she kept with her. She lasted about 5 hours before she was fired. Another year, a kid we hired for the holiday season was stealing the gift cards that came with the purchasing electronics items. So he wasn't stealing from us, he was stealing from the customer, and that was worse than stealing from the company. He lasted a week. Story 72. We had this douche canoe earn his position through nepotism only, since his dad was a friend of the GM. It was obvious he had no clue what he was doing, but we just rolled our eyes and tolerated it. Anywho, we were in the middle of this huge project with a $20 million budget, which at the time was going to be first to market. The company was balls deep invested in this thing, and the stakes were high. So crap for brains over here got tired of his laptop after 6 months and wanted the newer model, so he sold it. It turns out, as fate would have it, that he sold it to someone who just so happened to work for a competing company. He was obviously not smart enough to wipe it either, so it was full of confidential files. Long story short, the other company came to market with a competing product 2 weeks before ours was due to launch. Management were absolutely incandescent with rage. They found out somehow about this guy selling his laptop, and as soon as he walked through the door the next morning, he was hauled into the boardroom, and all I heard for the next hour was just a constant barrage of muffled yelling. He then exited the boardroom, white as a sheet, got his stuff, and left. I never saw him again. Story 73. Started on the day that the whole company went on a 4-day retreat to Italy. On day 1, he got a warning for inappropriate behavior towards his female colleagues. On day 2, he was fired for inappropriate behavior towards female colleagues. Had to find his own way home too. Story 74. A school I worked at, the network manager left and they asked if he would recommend the recently employed junior technician to fill his role. No way, of course. This was a desktop technician with no experience yet, no networking knowledge, no real anything to qualify jumping into a much bigger role after a couple of months. Long and short of it was that the school saw an opportunity to cut costs by not hiring in a replacement with experience at 40,000 pounds and instead bumping some guy up from 18,000 pounds to 21,000 pounds. The network manager said it was a daft idea, but they did it anyway after he left. The network fell over a couple of times, had to keep bringing in outside help, but what sealed it for the newly promoted lad was that he found the head teacher's corporate card in her office desk whilst re-imaging machines during the summer. For some reason, he decided that he wouldn't get caught using the card for a load of adult subscription sites. No idea how he thought no one would notice. There's only half a dozen folks on site during the holidays, so they zeroed in on him pretty quick. Well, that and he admitted it straight away. Story 75. First day training as a cook. Dude's got no experience, but it was during COVID, so we were hiring anybody. About halfway through his shift, he must have figured he was the expert and started telling his trainer he was doing things wrong. The trainer laughed and said, "No, I'm not. Now, pay attention." That was apparently offensive enough for the trainee to square up and challenge his trainer to a fight on the line, right next to the fryers and grills and countless sharp objects. He was laughed at and ridiculed so hard by the entire kitchen staff, he just ran out the back door. But it doesn't end there. The guy actually came back about an hour later to the front and stayed yelling at our 16-year-old host to give him his paycheck. When that didn't work, he went up to the bar, and demanded the same thing from the bartender. The bartender explained, "It doesn't work like that in this state," so he had to come back on payday. He didn't like that, so again started threatening to fight everybody. At that point, our heavily pregnant, take-no-crap bar manager came out and got right in his face and told him if he was going to fight anybody, it was going to be her, and he would deeply regret it. Dude was finally speechless and looked like his brain froze doing a hard reboot. He stammered a few things and finally ran off, never to be seen again. His paycheck is still sitting in my office. He never called or came back. Story 76. Came for training orientation. Disappears after lunch. Comes back, collects his belongings, and tells us he failed his substances test. Mysteriously reappears at work 2 weeks later with a clean substances test. Turns out the CFO was his mom. Story 77. I've had 2 fired before lunch on their first day, both warehouse staff. One was a temp who bragged to the person training him that he'd sued the last 2 companies he was placed with for injury and harassment, and he'd be looking to do the same to us. Employee came and reported the comment, and I walked him immediately out of the building and canceled the temp placement. The other was a full-time employee who showed up to his first day in the warehouse without safety-toe shoes. No problem. We gave him a pair of caps to wear. Later in the day, he spotted an office employee in the warehouse and yelled at them for not having safety toes on and told them that if he had to wear caps, they had to wear caps. This happened to be the owner of the company he was talking to. He was also let go before lunch. Story 78, about 30 minutes. The guy clearly lied on his resume. We were working on a drilling rig, and the newbie shows up with the price tag still on his coveralls. The tool push tells the rookie to grab a 2 to 4 and the dope and meet him in the doghouse. Here's some colloquial language and the translation's tool push. Foreman 2 to 4, 24-inch pipe wrench dope. Pipe dope used to seal the connections in the pipe doghouse. Control area off the rig floor, the new guy gets in his truck and leaves. Kinda weird, but weird crap happens all the time. Figure he couldn't cut it or forgot something at camp. He shows up 30 minutes later, grinning ear to ear, carrying a flat of beer. Everyone stops to look at him. He loudly announces he got the 2 to 4, 24 beers, and the dope, indicating a bag of pot sitting on top of the flat of beer. He just needed to know where the doghouse was. Somehow. The funniest part was that he thought there was a doghouse on site. Like, we had a pet dog hanging out at the drilling rig. Story 79. We were part of a mass group of about 30 people being hired to work the railroad. We are basically on day 1 of the corporate onboarding. Dude starts going off about the per diem we get every day. Corporate basically said be in your room on the weekends by midnight and you can claim for on the weekend as well. This dude starts getting in an argument about what happens if he checks in at 12:30. They're like, it doesn't matter. As long as we can prove that you were in your room from your key card, we're going to give you the per diem on the weekend. Dude doesn't drop it. It doesn't compute. He comes up with a bunch of hypothetical situations in which he's not going to get the per diem. And at this point, the finance department is like, shut the fuck up. Dude proceeds to get in like a million little arguments with all of the management and eventually is heard in the hallway saying that he's going to come back and shoot the place up if he's not taken seriously. Next minute, we know the building is on lockdown and railroad police are in the building locking everything down. We were not allowed to return to the hotel until they escorted him to the train station and sent him back his merry way. Story 80. Orientation day number 1, 7 a.m. Tildarer. New hire steals vodka from the gift basket and gets a crap-faced in 30 minutes while in orientation. We had to use the main conference room rather than the training room that day. The main conference room had the table set with a centerpiece for an upcoming event later that day. It was a gift basket, and it also contained a bottle of vodka, but it was all wrapped up in cellophane, so they decided to just leave it there. The facilitator steps out of the room for a few minutes after we all get seated, and this dude reaches over and very carefully unwraps the gift basket, takes the bottle out, pours it into his personal water bottle, like all of it, then takes the bottled water at the table, refills the empty vodka with water, puts it back in the basket, and rewraps it and sits back down. Like, we didn't all just watch him do this. We all sat in silence, unsure what to do. He probably would have gotten away with it if he hadn't gotten so totally crap-faced so fast. By 7:30 a.m., the guy was literally sliding out of his chair. The facilitator stops the orientation to get him some medical attention, thinking maybe he was having a stroke or something. While that's going on, another HR rep comes in to ask if anyone had noticed anything, and everyone started saying he stole the vodka. Dude lasted 30 minutes. Story 81. Well, not fired per se, but working at Kohl's, they hired anyone that shows up to the interview. This guy showed and did his interview. He went okay, and they said they would contact him later with a job offer. I was working loss prevention, and as such, something just didn't sit right with me. So after he leaves, he decides to check out the store. He walked into shoes and immediately took a pair of wire cutters out and clipped a security sensor off some shoes and switched them with his old shoes. He put the old shoes back in the box and walked away. He then went into jewelry and proceeded to pocket around $200 worth of primrose silver-plated jewelry into his pocket, then walked into the athletic department and put on a puffy Adidas jacket. He then tried to walk out where I confronted him. He said, "Oh, I was just getting some things to start working." I tried talking him back inside, but he took off. I called PD and they found him about half a mile away from the store. They brought him back to me and I asked him, "So you have an interview, you take things and expect me not to have your information after you walk off?" He said, "I didn't think about that." Police searched him and he had a small Ziploc filled with M30s and a pipe to smoke. Ended up going to jail for theft and possession. Story 82. I was onboarding a new software engineer. I work in it. During the meeting, they kept demanding I disable MFA for all their logins, device and geolocation restrictions, etc., and send them an additional laptop. He was senior level but didn't seem to understand tech at all. I raised my concerns with his manager. Turns out he was obviously outsourcing his role. He was fired a couple hours later. Story 83. We had a section that did client data entry, but required some thinking interpretation, not high level, just some basics. Hired a girl who had "do not hire her" suggestions from 3 of our other staff, relatively small country town. They hired her anyway. Didn't know what annual meant, so entered the dates as 1 day away, should have been 1 year. Got corrected a few times, continued to do it. Got moved to paper sorting, filing, couldn't get that right. We suggested she probably shouldn't come back the next day. This was after training, not 5 seconds in. Wow. Story 84. Guy gets hired as a line cook in the hotel restaurant where I'm waiting tables. He shows up a little early for his first shift, and the kitchen manager asks me to show him where the time clock, lockers, uniform pickup, and break room are. The guy drops his backpack into a locker, gets changed, and starts his shift. During the shift, I keep seeing him in the walk-in cooler and the walk-in freezer. He volunteers how he's trying to find out where all of the food is kept so he can work better. Fair enough, he seems like a hard worker and a decent guy. The end of the shift rolls around and I notice the new guy is walking out with his backpack and a large army duffel bag. I yelled for the kitchen manager to come quick, which brought most of the kitchen staff and the manager running in. The manager looks at the duffel bag and asks the new guy what's in there. New guy knows he can't escape, so he drops the bag and unzips it. 2 prime ribs, steaks, fish, and a ham are in the bag. New guy not only got canned on the spot, he got a free ride to the police station. Story 85. Second week of training maybe? Call center job had 4 weeks of training, unaffectionately known as death by PowerPoint. Guy has been okay and quite quiet so far, but comes in that morning with bloodshot eyes and a red face. The afternoon session, he's rubbing his eyes and squinting, tells the trainer it's because he forgot his glasses. She asks if he wants to sit near the front, but he says he'll be okay. 5 minutes later, he's asleep. Takes 2 shouts of his name and a nudge to wake him up. Trainer suggests he goes outside to get some fresh air and a drink of water. He argues a bit, but she insists, so he leaves the room. 2 minutes after that, building security is at the door, asking for his bag and jacket. He'd fell down the stairs. People sitting near him then say he smelled like vodka, and another 1 or 2 say they saw him going to the Spar at lunch where we think he bought a half bottle. Story 86. Material guy at work went out on lunch and smoked, came back and boss smelled it all over and called him out. Coworker explains it legal now and no different than a smoke break. Boss gave him 5 minutes to clear his locker and be off the property. Story 87. Not like the quickest, I've seen worse, but I think about this story once in a while as like a peril to hiring your best friends. Company I was at had a hiring mini spree years ago. One of the new bosses brought on one of his buddies from a previous company. Nothing wrong with that. Boss was in a somewhat higher level position now though. Well, the buddy thought it was still the good old days. I could tell something was a bit off because he kept laughing obnoxiously all the time and making pretty dumb jokes. Boss guy I could tell was amused most of the time, but was also trying to project a new air of authority. We started doing these long planning sessions about a week or 2 after his buddy was hired. Every meeting would get interrupted by the buddy cracking jokes or trying to show the boss something funny on his phone, and like in the middle of other conversations too. After a meeting and during a little sidebar conversation between engineers and the boss, his buddy was pestering him to look at something funny on his phone. Boss guy finally cracked and yelled at his friend loudly, "We're having a conversation," and his buddy was fired the next day. In story 88. I spent 4 ducking hours trying to teach a senior developer how to move some files from one folder to another to set up his environment. Okay, command line seemed a bit confusing, so let's use our file explorer and now highlight the files. No, you just opened it, you need to single-click the file or click and drag your mouse. No, you just close the window. Let's start by opening that folder again. No, that's not you, File Explorer. The File Explorer is that one. Okay, now just single-click on the file. No, that was a double-click. Only press your finger down once. Stop, stop, stop. Don't click the X button. You just close the window again. Needless to say, after 4 hours of not being able to move a file from one place to another, he was let go. I wasn't involved in the interview process and still don't understand how he passed his technical screening. Story 89, 4 days. I even hired the guy, seemed great, hard worker, super respectful, well-dressed in the interview, had good references. Turns out we have women captains and women crew, tour boat, and that he was a misogynistic pause. He badmouthed one of our female captains on his first day, wouldn't listen to any direction given to him by a female crew, and called his manager sweet cheeks on day 4. I fired him before his next shift. Damn you, Andrew, wherever you are now. Story 90. One person got fired before they even started because they posted negative things about the company on social media. After accepting the job offer, HR found it and pulled the plug immediately. Story 91. We interviewed a contract to hire over video conference. The interview went great. We made an offer. They started 2 weeks later. Guy showed up for work. It wasn't the same guy I had interviewed. He had a different accent and couldn't answer simple questions about the job that he had answered in the interview. He must have hired someone to do the interview for him, hoping we wouldn't notice. He got fired when he came in the next day. Story 92. 2013 Navy Boot Camp. Once in processing officially begins, you do not stop for sleep until every task is done. Uniforms, haircuts, custom shoe inserts. It feels interminable. But it does end, usually 24 hours later, sometimes longer. At the end, when you are good and exhausted and overloaded and confused and just want to start training, they sit 1,000 people down in a huge room and say, if you lied on your application to get here and you actually did use substances, no problem. Just tell us now and you're good. But we have to know. We can't let you begin training until we know. Just raise your hand, no problem at all. We'll sort it out for you. You're here, you've made it. About 100 hands went up. They were removed from the group and never heard nor saw again. Time in Navy 3 days. Story 93. My boss hired this guy, late teens, early 20s, and I was scheduled to train him. Every time I walked by my boss, he'd ask, hey, how's X doing there? Is he keeping up? You think he's all right? I said he's good and has a good attitude, work ethic. A few hours into the day, my boss comes into the room with us and goes, hey, X, you're all set. I don't think we're gonna need you. And just like that, the dude looked at me and said, it's been real, dude, shook my hand and walked out. My boss later said he just got a weird vibe and didn't trust him. So yeah, kind of weird. Story 94. This was 15 plus years ago. I got a job at a restaurant in a plaza as a busser. We had a training group to go over company culture, blah, 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 then lunch break, then actual training. One of the server trainees went to another restaurant in the plaza during lunch in her uniform, chugged a few drinks, and walked out on the tab. Their manager came over during the second session, pointed her out, and she was fired immediately. Like the drinking is bad enough, but to do it in uniform and then not pay? Hilarious. Story 95. We'd hired someone as a maternity leave hire, but they did so well at the job that we offered her a full-time permanent role. As soon as we did this, it was like she let her hair down and revealed who she really was. She picked up on our material very quickly, but she also became very bossy and snapped at people. The last straw was when she got angry at everyone and yelled at one team member who was a very quiet and not confident but brilliant person that we'd been working to become more confident, simply for laughing with another coworker. We saw this transformation to be pretty alarming, and my manager pulled the permanent offer, which was awkward but needed to, he done. Another example that showed me being likable at work is just as important as the other factors at work. Not being an idoit is just as important as your actual work ethic. Story. 96, second day, she no-showed the first week Tuesday, Friday that she started with us, with no explanation. Later said she was taking approved sick leave for mental health reasons, collected one-day pay, and was fired immediately. Story 97. While working as a fresh co-op student at PV Electronics, on the first day, one of my cohort was relaxing in his chair with his hands behind his head. A middle-aged man came in, looked at relaxing guy and said, working hard? Relaxing guy grinned and said, yep. Middle-aged guy told him he was fired and walked out. Middle-aged guy was Hartley Peavy, the owner of the company. Story 98. We hired a new receptionist, and as she was in charge of opening our building in the morning, which included disabling the alarm system. Her first solo morning, she managed to set off the alarm because she forgot the code and kept entering wrong guesses. Luckily, the director arrived shortly afterwards to disable the alarm and call off police and security who had been dispatched to the site. Before day 2, we told her to keep the code handy in case she forgot again, so she placed a note in her purse. She ended up opening the door, which started the countdown to another alarm, then proceeded to slowly dig through her purse for the note, then for her reading glasses. And before she could enter the code, the countdown had run out and the alarm went off. This time, the police arrived on scene, and we ended up with a false alarm fee. The director viewed the security footage and watched this woman fumble around in her bag for a ridiculous amount of time while the alarm was counting down and decided he wasn't getting another chance. Story 99. It for a major hospital chain. I was tasked with training the new guy, brought him over to the pharmacy, planning to show the PC image we use for the devices in there. At one point, I turned to him to chat and see him just staring around the room. Like, I had to say his name standing 2 feet away from him to get his attention. He makes a comment about all the prescriptions and says, "Man, there is so much money in here," in earshot of the pharmacist. After drawing some looks, we left and I told him to go back to the office. I stopped back into the pharmacy to apologize and then headed back to the office myself. This must have been 5, maybe 10 minutes tops. I walked back into the office to find this guy had already turned his desk so it was facing away from the doorway, blocking access to our spare equipment, and was logged into RuneScape. Enter our site team lead. Guy didn't make it through the morning, but obviously just didn't care. Story 100. I was a captain for an ambulance agency. I had a trainee show up for their first shift 45 minutes late, grossly out of uniform, shorts and Crocs. At the time, I thought I had infinite patience and was willing to give the benefit of the doubt when I said, "You're late and out of uniform." He said, "At least I showed up," with the smarmiest chuckle. I immediately saw red, sent him home, and processed his termination. The interaction was all of 3 minutes, and given how late he was, I actually think it counts as negative time with the company. What's the fastest you've seen someone quit or get fired? Story 1. Didn't even make it to his desk. I was working for a telecom company back in the day. My team was developing a self-install program for cable modems. To tell you how long it was ago, the spec called for it to fit on a floppy disk just in case. Anyways, I hired a new employee, looked completely normal. Average guy. I walk him to his workstation. I tell him, "This will be your desk." He just says nope and walks back out. Would never explain why. I'm still confused 16 years later. Story 2. In 2007, I took a job at a staffing company. Early in the morning on my first day, I received another, better job offer via phone. When I came back from taking that phone call outside, I came back into my manager who looked very relieved. He thought I had left. He told me the person who previously held my position went on a lunch break and never came back. As soon as he said that, I knew my destiny. I took my lunch later that day and vanished. Story 3. At the carnival. Guy walks over and asks to see the manager of this food area. The manager comes over, a tubby white guy with a big cowboy hat on. Black guy says he's looking for a job during the fair. Manager talks to him for about 2 minutes, then hires him. Manager says, "So, where do you want to work?" "I need a boy running stock from the back to the grill, a boy working the rib grill, a boy running the condiments, and a boy on the till." Black guy says, "Are you going to be calling me boy the whole time?" Manager says, "No, I'll be calling you rib boy, stock boy, till boy, whatever job you wind up doing." Guy says, "Nah, I won't be nobody's boy," and walks away. Story 4. I got fired from Subway after 4 hours for putting too many olives on a sandwich. Art is not subjective when it's sandwiches, I guess. This happened in 2000. The rule was either 4 or 6 slices per sandwich, and someone asked for extra, so I sprinkled a handful on there. After that sandwich, the owner pulled me into the back and asked why I put so many olives on there. I told him the customer asked for extra, and he kind of sighed and said, "I don't think this is going to work out." I went back the next day to turn in my green shirt and get my $20 back. Had to pay for the uniform myself. Story 5. Like an hour. I worked at a Sonic right after high school, and this addict dude had his first day, and I'm supposed to be training him. Well, the manager was putting money from the box into the safe when a customer came up and started Karening, so he got distracted and went outside. Crackhead sees a grand sitting on the table, grabs it, and skedaddles. Ducked up part is that 2 weeks later, the git comes trying to get his check for a whole 45 minutes. Manager says it's in the back, calls the police, and got him arrested. Story 6. He drove 45 minutes to a job to teach a kid how to juggle. When he got there, he was told that his duties as juggling teacher included bathing and toileting their teenage autistic son. I don't think he stayed long. Story 7. I got fired from a busboy job in high school after 4 hours. I was running around clearing tables and trying to keep up when this old lady kept asking me for matches. I kept telling her to please ask her waitress since I had no clue where they were. She yelled at me. I forgot what it was, but it pissed me off. So I went to the front desk, found a big bowl of matches, and dumped them in her lap. It was right then I realized I had no business dealing with the public. Story 8. In high school, I got hired at Dairy Queen. I turned up for my first shift, and the manager went to the back to get my hat/shirt/name tag. While I waited, a family friend who owned a furniture store came out of the bathroom, and when I told him that I was working at Dairy Queen, he said, "You don't want to work here. Come work for me instead." I did. As soon as the manager returned, I quit. All told, I was there less than 15 minutes. Story 9. I quit about an hour and a half into my first shift as a telemarketer. We were selling 5-year subscriptions of Hustler and Playboy to a list of AARP members. One gentleman I spoke to was 92 and bought 5 years of Hustler. I felt horrible. I got up and just left. Story 10. I quit a job before I had the chance to even start. A lot of restaurants here in New England are seasonal, and one was gearing up to open a few towns over for me. It took 3 interviews for an ice cream scooper and cashier position, twice with one person, once with another before getting the job. Okay, great. I'm told that I will start at a set date approximately 2 weeks away. I finally get an email about a week later asking where I was. What the hell? I call my manager, no answer. Call the other one, no answer. So I email them. Turns out they emailed me as the restaurant as opposed to their regular email, so it went to my spam. They, the owner and manager, emailed me asking me to start a week earlier and never waited for a reply confirming the earlier date. They just assumed I got it and agreed to it. What bothered me was the fact they emailed me only once. Every manager I've ever had calls me and leaves me a message. What the nail in the coffin, though, was I ended up playing email tag with both managers, and I was being told I was to come in at 2 separate times. I wrote a very polite letter saying I was not going to work for people that obviously could not communicate with one another or have the decency to call, let alone not wait for a reply or confirmation. Story 11. A guy, qualified butcher, turned up for his first day of work at a butcher shop and does what he is told to do. Until lunchtime, then the boss, who was a real idiot at times, caught him and fired him on the spot. Turns out the guy was a diabetic and was giving himself his insulin shot. Ended up suing the boss and winning. Story 12. When I was in high school, I interviewed for a job as a claims agent for a windshield repair company. In a single phone call, I was told I was hired, but informed them I couldn't work weekends because of marching band, which they did not inquire about during the interview, and was then told that I was fired because of my unavailability. Story 13. Hired a carpenter to work on a youth jail in a remote village in AK. Told him it was a secure facility and he would need to pass a background check. He said no problem, put all the paperwork in, flew him out first thing Monday morning to start work. He's on site less than 4 hours when the state troopers roll up and arrest him for an outstanding warrant. Needless to say, he was also fired. Story 14. We had a training class start one Monday and my colleague did all the interviews. When he walked into the class, I immediately knew something was wrong. He looked very confused. He tells the class to hang tight and that he wants to see me outside in the hallway. Turns out the guy was a definite no, so why was he in our class? We asked to see the Jesus-looking hippie guy in the hallway, who was wearing the same thing as he was in the interview. Crap clothes and sandals. We are an IT advisory firm, so dressing up is kind of mandatory. Us. Did you sign an offer letter from us? Him. I don't think so, but I called the administrator when I didn't hear back from you guys, and she said the class started at 8 a.m. Monday morning. Us. What exactly did you ask her? Him. When does the training class start? Us. Okay. So we didn't hire you. That is why you didn't get an offer letter. Him. Well, do you mind if I stay for the training anyways? Us. No, you have to go. Him. Oh, all right. Cool. Well, see you later. Us. What the duck just happened there? Story 15. Myself didn't even get past the lobby. I'm going on year 3 of being unemployed. I hate it. I hate myself, hate everything about my life. Anyways, not too long into unemployment, I got a job offer. A phone bank in the next town over. HR was known to me. We both attended the same summer camp. I as a counselor, he as a parent adult leader. He joked that a lot of people who apply don't even show up for the interview, are just doing it for welfare reasons. This region is known for its casually a whole attitude towards welfare because of the other half's casually abusive attitude towards welfare. It was pretty much a shoo-in, no way they wouldn't hire me. The half-hour drive was nothing compared to a full-time $8 per hour job. This was especially important because my ex and I were still on and off seeing each other, and I had it in my head that if I got a job, I could rekindle things with her. A week before the training day, I was with her, and she asked if I had a job yet, and I said no. Didn't want to spoil the surprise. Well, really was being pessimistic and just knew something was going to go wrong, but I wanted to believe in good things. The day of our first training session comes up. I went all out, bought materials for lunch, emptied out my lunch bag filled with Game Boy parts, showered, dressed, cleaned, and pressed. Early morning drive out of town in the middle of winter. Excited and nervous. I enter the lobby and there's a few dozen people. The company was hiring a batch of new workers since they had planned on expanding services yearly. I started chatting up some of my new coworkers. They were excited and nervous too. A few were clearly in over their heads, but more power to them. We had to go up to the desk, show ID, and if we had it, proof of citizenship, crap. I forgot mine, but I could bring it in later. I show the HR guy, same guy who offered me the job, my ID. Oh, shining rated? You're not supposed to be here. What? Didn't you get our calls? We called you 3 times in the past 2 weeks to tell you not to show up. I didn't get any goddamn calls and showed my received missed calls section to prove it. Oh, well, can you wait in the lobby? All right, sure, it's a job. Maybe they wanted some more information before I went into training. It was just a mistake. Surely some of the other new hires had to wait as well. And there they go, being called to the first training seminar. And I said goodbye and I'll catch up. They just need to talk to me to my new coworker friends. And they all filed out, leaving me alone in the lobby. Got to wait a good 10-15 minutes before the HR guy came back out. Shining ready. Sorry, something came up on your background check. Really? I was genuinely surprised. I'd never been arrested or did anything that should have come back. What? Well, I'm sure it's just a mistake, and something implying that he didn't actually run my background check, or the information didn't come in yet. Something to say it's not his fault or anything serious. But they really did call seriously, guys. It's my fault for not remembering and deleting the information. Sorry, but you have to go. We'll call you tomorrow to clear it up. I ate my lunch on the drive back into town as a late second breakfast. My roommates were surprised to see me, since they were sure I'd just started a full-time job and it had only been 2 hours or so. I just told them that something came up, they'll get back to me, and stripped down, crawled back into bed and curled up for a while. Next day, no call. Day after that, no call. I call in and leave a message. A week goes by, I call again since this was supposed to be the next group's training session week I was supposed to attend. Still not in. Leave another message with my phone number. 3 times, just to make sure. By this point, things with my ex deteriorated further, and we finally split it off for good, leaving me in utter depression for Christmas. Yay. Start of the next year, I leave another message. Annoyed, bitter, they failed to do their part as an employer, but professional, reminding them that I still haven't heard from them. And at this point, I just want to know what the problem was in case I need to clear things up with my name to other employers. Never heard back from them. According to a friend of the family, they laid off a lot of people around the same time, which my parents took as proof that it was nothing personal, except for being the only one made to wait and leave, as if I was going to start pillaging the moment I made it further than the front door. Story 16. Where I work, we hired a sales rep, and he started Monday morning. He left for lunch and never came back. We found out, apparently, through a couple of his mutual friends, that he decided, while at lunch, to go live as a wanderer primarily in South America. Apparently, he went home, packed a bag, and headed south. Story 17. I worked for my dad, and as such, I had what most would call a manager's position, but it was more like I just made sure the workers kept working when my dad was not around. Well, this guy, maybe 29 or so, we hired, comes in on his first, and I greet him and start telling him what to do and how to do it, the usual. Well, I go off and do my own thing for maybe 20 minutes when one of our other employees comes back and says the new guy is flipping crap because he has to work for someone so much younger than him, and it's unfair that I have a higher position than him just because I am the boss's son and a bunch of other stuff. So I called my dad, and he told me that it is probably best to just send him on his way and to call the next person that had applied, and so I fired him not even 28 minutes into the day. Story 18. Watched a woman ask the president of the company, "Who do you think you are?" When he asked her why she wasn't working, she was gone within the hour, an update. Since so many people asked, here's the story. The woman started working that morning, but since she didn't know what a login password was, she had the password but didn't know what to do with it. She sat at her desk and read a trashy romance novel in front of her computer. When the president of the company walks by and sees her sitting there, he asks her why she's not working. She asked him who does he think he is, and that she never got her Yahoo account yet. Her actual words. He said that he would look into it for her and asked her name. He marched into the HR office and said he wanted her gone. They walked her out. About 5 minutes later, story 19. Let me tell you about Paige. Paige and I worked together at an ice cream store for about 2 months. She was 21 and had just moved here from Houston. Everything she told us after that differed between people, so I'm not entirely sure what her real story was. Whatever the case, she was generally a good worker who socialized with the customers and performed her duties properly for the most part. It was when she started expounding about her personal life that things got a little weird. Paige had told me that she was in the Navy since she was 18 and had just been given a medical discharge. She was feeling better now, but wanted to hold off on going back into service. To our boss, Paige said she had just been through basic training and was taking some time off while waiting to be stationed. She claimed to have been adopted and that her adoptive parents loved their biological child more than her, kicking her out at 18. She also told me that she had been assaulted a couple of years ago and was very cautious about pursuing relationships, and all of this on her first shift. Over the next month, she began to divulge more and more about her personal life and her other job at a competing ice cream shop. There was an older man who was a regular, and Paige insisted that he was in the police force and was going to get her a good word in. When I asked her about it later, she said that he was trying to have some kind of affair with her, though she wouldn't show me any of the supposed texts. Then she got a boyfriend. Paige had only mentioned the guy a couple times, and other than that, the two of them worked together at the other store. I didn't know much about him. After a week, Paige came into work crying because she was unsure of where their relationship was heading. She then tried to drop hints and innuendos towards me. At one point, even saying, my boyfriend has always wanted to try stuff with another guy. And I told him that's fine, as long as I'm there too. I rebuffed her and acted like I didn't know what she was trying to say. A week after that, Paige told me that she thought she was pregnant because she missed her period. Her and her boyfriend had been having sex without any kind of birth control. opting for the tried-and-true pull-out method. The last week that she worked, Paige called in twice, citing morning sickness. The night she was supposed to work with me, she was a no-call, no-show. I texted her asking where she was, and she replied that she asked for the night off. The only problem was, she didn't mark anything on the calendar or bother to check her schedule to see that she, in fact, didn't get the day off. I, of course, sent her all this, to which I got no reply. My boss came in to cover for her, and after that week, that was the last we heard of Paige. Story 20. The company I used to work in hired temps. We worked outside in a brutal winter that year, and the work was pretty difficult if you haven't been in the industry. I had about 6 temps in a row quit on the first day, but the one that stands out told me that he needed to go to the washroom quick time 5 minutes into teaching him the job. We watched him get in his car. We were 5 minutes from the parking lot, but there was a fence between the site and the lot, and drive off. I gave him a call asking where he went. Maybe it's an emergency? He said he was in the washroom. No, we just watched you drive off in your car. He told me I was a ducking liar, so I asked him if he'll be back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes at most. I decided since there's been a wave of people quitting, I'll give him a break. Maybe he's insecure and can't use a public washroom. 2 hours later, he returns with McDonald's and asked, "It's lunchtime, right?" I couldn't believe he had the balls. I was an unofficial supervisor, long story, but I told him to go home, and he was only getting paid the first hour he showed up. Story 21. I did this at Walmart. I put in an application when I got back to college from summer break, so that would have been early September or so. They call me at the end of November and demand I come in for an interview. Not, "Are you still interested?" but, "You will interview Friday at 3 p.m. Do not wear open-toed shoes. I don't have a job, and I would like to upgrade from eating ramen." So I say sure. Also, interviewing for a job on Black Friday is all kinds of nuts, but that's another story. At this point, I have no idea what position I even applied for. But after the interview, they say that instead of that position, I should work in electronics instead. I say okay, and I'm officially hired. The training procedure is done on the computers in the back. You watch videos, including one that patronizingly tells you that all unions are bad, take little quizzes, etc. The lady who hired me got me started on this and said my supervisor would be in to talk to me soon. A couple days later, I finished with those, and now I'm like, now what? I've never met my supervisor. I can't find the lady who hired me. Everyone else in the back has no idea who I am or what I'm doing there. I wander out into the electronics section to try and find someone to tell me what to do, and I'm instantly confronted by a line of about 15 people staring at me. It is at this point I realize that I'm a Walmart employee during Christmas rush, in a section that nobody else is staffing all by myself. I have not been trained to do anything. I still haven't been trained on the registers. I don't have the keys to the game area. I still don't even know who my supervisor is. So I look at the people. They look at me. I say, "Hey folks, I'll find someone to help you," and dive back into the back. I take off the name tag, clock out, strip off the blue shirt, and escape through the back, never to return. Nobody ever called me to ask UTF or to tell me I was fired, and I still don't know who my supervisor was. Story 22. It was me. I was hired to be a cleaning guy at a hospital. Wasn't too amped for it, but whatever. I get there and they start talking about all the deadly diseases I could get from just being at work. Noped out of there before lunch. Story 23. Worked at an upmarket estate agency in a wealthy part of the UK as an admin assistant. They had this cute little Fiat 500C decked out with the company logos. I was getting petrol one afternoon and saw the Fiat pull in, so bounded out to say hello to whichever of my colleagues was driving it. Turned out to be a total stranger. The new guy, hadn't met him yet, but went over and introduced myself anyways. He was mega friendly, but then back at work, kinda offish. In fact, made zero effort throughout his first week to be friendly. Got kinda stressy on the phone with clients, was awkward and hard to read. Monday morning, new guy second week. I get in, and as a lowly assistant, I don't have my own account, so I hop onto the bosses to check his emails and deal with any inquiries as per. I find an email from a very, very pissed off gentleman titled, "Your company car." Obviously, I read it. The guy outlined how over the weekend, someone fitting the description of the new guy, driving the company car, had zoomed up behind him at 50 miles per hour in a 30 zone, practically run him off the road tailgating and wildly gesticulating at him from behind, blaring the horn, and nearly causing an accident with an oncoming vehicle when he tried to overtake. My personal favorite part was something along the lines of, "Might I advise that should your chap want to play racing games in a quiet residential area, he might consider not doing so in such a heavily branded vehicle." I discreetly tell a senior colleague of the situation, and the directors are notified. New guy is called upstairs and then promptly sent back down, clearly on the verge of tears. He said, "I've just been fired." I've no idea why he didn't leave straight away, but it was incredibly awkward. Total 1 week employment, and his wife had a baby on the way. Story 24. I quit while I was reading the script during training. It was a sales job, and the place blatantly lied about what the product, a health supplement, could do. I walked out because I don't want the FBI coming in and hauling me off to prison for minimum wage versus commission. Story 25. Okay, I think no one can beat this in terms of time on the job. It was opening night of a big new grocery store, and me and my fellow 16-year-old rookie employees were all appointed unique tasks that night because the shop wanted to show off, which included dressing up as a cereal brand mascot, handing out gifts. My friend was elected to be one of those to dress up, but he didn't want to, so he promised to buy me a Coke for swapping shifts, which started an hour apart. So I dressed up and started handing out merchandise, slowly realizing I'm completely anonymous in this suit. Hormone-driven me then got a little enthusiastic when cute girls were around and started giving them hugs, which somehow led to more and more people getting hugs. I was actually having a lot of fun. Then a while into the shift, a frowning and angry-looking, suited-up guy walked in the door, and I thought he could use a little hug from a chubby tiger, but he kind of barked, yelled, and cursed, mid-embrace how that wasn't proper, and asked me for my name. I suddenly got cold feet about the whole extra customer service euphoria I'd been doing in the hugging business, and bailed under an excuse of an emergency toilet break. Once in the dressing area, my hour in the suite was almost over, and the next dude had to go out as Winnie the Pooh or something, where he was abruptly manhandled by the dude in a suit demanding the identity of the chubby tiger. None of the employees really knew each other's names yet, and no one saw me change. So the only clue to who had been a little too frivolous with the customers was the ledger of our shifts, and when my friend appeared 5 minutes late for my shift, he was fired on the spot. He didn't think twice about it, as he thought it was because he was a little late, so he just turned around and left. But actually, the suited-up guy I hugged was the owner of the entire grocery store chain coming to check up on things. I still haven't told him, as he never gave me my Coke. But if you see this, sorry, David. Story 26. I quit a job after one day, literally one, all of it training. Background. I had worked in the substance abuse treatment field for 6 years. I'd been a licensed counselor for 2, all of it at one facility. I started to hate the job and eventually decided to explore other facilities. So I got an interview with one, a distinguished place with a lot of state contracts, steady client census, etc. Interview goes well. They want to hire me, and I say yes. Deep down, however, I was thinking no. I had begun to have misgivings about the whole counseling thing, despite finding a decent amount of money for me and a lot of success and talent in the field. Nevertheless, bills. So I accepted the job, show up to work, go through training, and they show me to my office, a 6x10 windowless hellhole. Okay, I think. At least I have an office, right? Fast forward to the end of the day. I'm packing up and getting ready to leave. Supervisor pulls me aside and informs me of my schedule for the rest of the week. A light caseload, as she put it. Basically, I was already scheduled to perform 26-hour-long individual therapy sessions, all with different clients, along with 6-hour-long group therapies. Essentially, every second was accounted for, all of it in mentally grueling therapy sessions with clients who were court-ordered to be there. To this day, I remember my thought being, when am I going to have time to crap? Couldn't sleep, hated life, called the next morning before my scheduled shift and informed my supervisor that the job wasn't for me and I wouldn't be reporting. Never cashed the 1 day of wages check either. Felt too guilty, but it was the best decision I've ever made. I realized I had been dumping my life into something I didn't want to do, and it was making me miserable and ruining my marriage. 4 months after quitting, I changed careers. Now I write fantasy novels and am the happiest I've ever been. Till dear. If you have to literally pause and think, when am I going to crap? The job sucks. Story 27. One time I found a neat way to get past the screensaver on our registers without entering an ID or password. I showed this to a new coworker. The next day he was fired for stealing money from the register. We had cameras watching the registers for employees trying to steal money. I knew this. He knew this. Everyone knew this because it's the first thing they tell you during employee training. Story 28. A guy came into the restaurant that I worked at for training. He asked us, the rest of the servers, about how much we make a week in tips. We were busy on the weekends, but weekdays were pretty slow, so we made about $200 to $300 a week. Average was about $1,500 a month. He said that wasn't enough, that he was used to working in more fine dining, where you could make $1,000 a week in tips, and left. I think it was about an hour in. We aren't fine dining, so I don't know what he was expecting. Story 29. I used to be a manager at one of the giant theme parks, and people were fired like it was for fun. This one girl on her first hour just took off her shirt and left. Story 30. I went to interview for a supposedly in-call-only call center. The boss told me after the interview to go ahead and start working since I was free for the rest of the day. Within 20 minutes of being told to call confirmed leads, which turned out to be people who had never heard of the company or the product I was suddenly supposed to be selling them. I gave the boss some form of medical emergency excuse about my girlfriend at the time and left. He tried calling me later that day, but I just didn't answer. I don't like being told that I'm going to be working for a company that is strictly one thing only to get there and see everyone doing something complete opposite. Story 31. There was a new girl who started as a host at the restaurant I work at. She was 18 and this was her first restaurant job, and she could only work 1 day a week due to a job conflict. She came in once. In the course of her duties that day, she locked herself in the walk-in fridge, which is unlocked at all times, and all you have to do is push against the door to get out. She gets sex on the door and yelled for help for a few minutes until a server heard and let her out. 2 people came in and went to the bar. She greeted them with a sing-song, "Hello!" An hour later when they left, she said goodbye in the same manner. The 2 patrons ignored her and left, at which point she calls them mother duckers, louder than she thought. A manager in training overheard. She never came back after that day. Story 32, my brother. I used to work at McDonald's in a suburb of a bigger city, and I ended up getting my bro a job. I was cool with the manager. So first day, he walks in nicely dressed and clean-shaven, looks at the manager, looks at me, and asks, "Is he gonna be my boss?" After giving him a confused look for a moment, taken aback by the sudden question of leadership, he sort of staggered out, "Yes." Now my brother's an ornery git with anger issues and a streak of bad behavior. After about 30 minutes of me teaching him what to do and sort of playfully ordering him around, I got excited by the prospect because he's 6 years older than me and it was nice to have that sort of come full circle. He went to the kitchen, grabbed a duckload of McChickens and fries and threw them everywhere. I gasped because I didn't expect the reaction and he wasn't even done yet. After his little rampage, he screamed, "Fuck this!" and ripped his uniform off, sending buttons flying everywhere. Fairly sure a few costumers were assaulted that day by the sudden sting of little plastic rockets. He then proceeded to stomp out the door, get into his truck, and pull a big smoky burnout for like 20 seconds before peeling out. That was also the day I was fired. Story 33. 2 things happened in quick succession with this employee. Let's call him P. Day 1, we asked him to fill up the freezer well with ice. It was an exceptionally hot day for Scotland, and when the sun comes out, we like to drink. P heads into the back freezer and hauls about 20 bags of ice onto the shop floor to fire into the freezer well. The frozen stuff is at the back of the shop, so he's not in sight of the rest of the staff. P proceeds to rip open every bag of ice and pour it individually into the freezer well. A good 20 bags worth of ice. At no point did he think twice about doing this. He cleans up after himself, dumps the bags in the bin, and heads back round to front of the shop, saying, "Job done." It's not till 20 minutes later that a customer comes to the front asking us when we started doing bag your own ice. He apologized for the error. We cleaned it up and kept it quiet from the bosses. Mistakes happen. Day 2, P heads off for his break. First stop is the toilet. Takes 10 minutes, comes out and heads to the staff room for his lunch. Another member of staff heads to the toilet afterwards, opens the door, and wall-to-wall, sink towel dispenser, lights, and everywhere else is covered in crap. He's palmed it on the ceiling and everywhere you can think of. He was back from his break and never told a soul about what he'd done. Just carried on as normal. When he was confronted over it, he simply said he had an accident. And yeah, that was the end of him after 2 days. Story 34. I work as the front office supervisor at a hotel. Basically front desk supervisor, but made to sound fancy. I'm responsible for training in all new employees, and as a 22-year-old with somewhat of a baby face, I've experienced my share of people not taking me seriously. We had this one girl who had a terrible attitude from the moment she walked in the door. She told me during her first hour that she couldn't take me seriously on account of being so much older than me. She was 28. After about a week of her constantly talking crap about the hotel and everyone in it while standing within earshot of guests, I took her into the office and basically told her to smarten up and think about whether this was the right fit for her. She handed me her name tag and told me she wouldn't be back. Story 35. When I was in college, a friend and I were going to hang drywall. He supposedly knew how to do this. We had none of the right tools. We started working, and after an hour, the supervisor shows up. "You boys are not going to make any money doing this. Get out of here. Wherever you are, bless you, man." Story 36. I had just been promoted to a management position at a small restaurant. I was meeting with my GM and owner. Our owner had a former coworker of his coming in to start a dishwashing job. The young Latino gentleman came in shortly after we started our meeting. He was surprised to see how much weight our owner had put on since last he saw him. It was obvious he was trying not to offend, but his limited English only allowed him to say something along the lines of, "What happened to you? You get big, fat." The owner flipped out. He went into a F-bomb-laced tirade, asking the guy how dare he speak so insultingly to him. Didn't he know who he was? What was wrong with him, etc. My GM and I just stared at our feet. The kid just sort of faded out of the room looking ashamed. I felt bad for him, but too scared of losing my job to stand up to my boss. The guy is a pretty rotten human being, as I've come to learn, and I no longer work for him or support his restaurants. Story 37. I quit a job before I even started. Accepted an offer at a car dealership selling brand new Hyundais. When they were doing reference checks, a previous employer of mine called me up and offered me a great salary with benefits and good vacation time. So I accepted, told the dealership what happened, and that I would not be able to work for them. They were very good about it and found it pretty ironic. Story 38. I work as a caregiver on the dementia unit of a nursing home. Chick gets hired on, throws a fit at the lady training her because no one talks to me like that. We thought maybe it was a cultural difference, as she was Jamaican, and let it go. Also, that particular trainer is a bit of a Karen, but she's amazing at her job, so we let it slide. The next day, one of the residents kicked her in the chest when she woke her up in the middle of the night to change her by talking loudly and turning on the lights. That's just asking to get kicked. Well, she slapped the resident across the face. The police came and got her about 20 minutes later. Haven't seen her since. Story 39. I was a shift manager at an industrial paint shop. Had a new temp start, and him and the other employees were out on the dock waiting to clock in. One of the guys came and got me and said I needed to see something. I go out on the dock. He didn't know who I was yet, and he walks up with a little plastic cup and asked if I had any drink. I replied, "What, like alcohol?" He said, "Yeah," fired him on the spot. Story 40. About 10 years ago, I was working as a key holder / new employee trainer at a smoothie place in a strip mall near downtown. Our owner had just hired a new employee and told me to expect her at 1 p.m. to get her a uniform and started with training and whatnot. At 9 a.m., right before I unlock the door, I see her come up and knock on the door. So I open the door and ask her if she knows she's early. She just nods and asks if she can come in. I'm like, sure, let's go ahead and get you started. So I get her a uniform, show her around, and basically have her shadow me for a few hours. She's doing a good job, no problems. Then around 12:45, a customer comes in and I'm like, "Hi, what I can get you," etc. And she goes, "Hi, I'm Megan. Rod hired me. I'm supposed to come start my first shift at 1. At this point, I look at the woman I'd been training all morning and ask if she was hired, who she was, what she was doing, etc. And she just said, "I've got a doctor's appointment," and left. When the owner came in later, I told him about it, and neither of us ever found out who she was or WTF she was doing. Story 41. Worked as management at a major manufacturing plant, and I was assigned a new guy to train. First couple hours, I told him to shadow me to get a feel for the job. As management in a UAW environment, life can get pretty hectic. I recall having to tell him to keep up a few times, and I tried my best to include him in everything I did to give him the chance to learn. So first break rolls around and everything slows down enough for me to sit down with the guy for a minute. I really look at him, and the look I saw on his face reminded me of the utter defeat you see on the faces of the NFL team that loses the Super Bowl in overtime. I knew then he was going to have a hard time, so I asked how he was feeling. He hesitated and then asked if he could go out for a cigarette, to which I replied, "That's no problem." He grabbed his coat and his lunchbox, and I knew then. Sure as crap, never saw the guy again. 2 hours, start to finish. Management isn't for everyone, I get that, but damn, at least give a real college try. Story 42. We had a guy get sent for a substances test as part of his hiring process. He passed and came back high as a kite. He got fired about 10 minutes after he walked in the door. Story 43. When my dad was a teenager, he was hired by an assisted living place, more of a hospice situation than assisted living. And he walked in the front door on his first day of work and continued walking right out the back door. Never went back. He was probably there for a total of 5 minutes. He said the smell and the oppressive nature of the place was too much to even consider staying. Story 44. I worked at a kennel for a while and trained people for the front desk job. The job entailed bringing dogs in for daycare and checking dogs in for boarding, also answering phones, giving tours, doing transactions, and all general customer service stuff. It wasn't very hard, but there was a crunch at the beginning and end of each day. Lots of regular customers with specific needs and demands, and a whole ton of regulations about which dogs you could bring back together and which you couldn't. How to handle new dogs and limited space up front. So often you would get stuck holding a leash in each hand with a line of customers out the front door, waiting for the people in the back to come up and clear out the dogs already filling up the front kennels and outside runs. So many people quit the first day. Many, instead of formally quitting, just left for the day and never came back. Every time we lost an experienced staff member, we would go through 5 to 10 new hires before we got one that would stick. I was just glad I never had to train people working in the back, too. They went just as quickly. Story 45. When I used to work at Best Buy, we got a new guy in, about 23 or 24-ish. He was from car sales and kind of sleazy to begin with, but seemed okay. He gets done with orientation, which is ducking long. It's like a full 8-hour day of Best Buy bullcrap. Comes in the next morning to open still drunk from the previous night of drinking. About 10 minutes into his shift, he says he's got to lay down for a few. An hour later, he comes out not looking any better. Some lady in printers asks him for help, so he goes over and starts selling her crap. Halfway through the sale, the customer's daughter comes over. He stops mid-sentence and looks her up and down at least twice, clearly checking her out. Then he asks the daughter if she needs help with anything in this creepy drunk guy tone. At this point, the mom goes ape crap asking for the manager. He gets fired about 10 minutes after that. Story 46. Me, apparently for wearing a shirt that shows 1/5 of my armpit. Got hired as an assistant at this salon when I was 21. The stylist hired 2 girls out of a group of 10 and talked down to us the whole time saying, I guess these last 2 will have to do since everyone else seems slow. Showed up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for work the next day. Even brought her a coffee. She walked in, took one look at me, and told me to go home because my armpits were exposed. I called her back that day to apologize and ask her what exactly I did wrong, and she was merciless, screaming at me, literally shouting at how I don't listen or respect her or the dress code. You couldn't even see my armpits. She said something like, yes, but in my experience, that material of shirt shrinks over time, and you will try to slide it past me. I was devastated, sobbing on the phone and heartbroken for weeks. I had never been fired before, and I had a lot of jobs before 21. Looking back, she was a miserable old goot to begin with, I guess. Story 47. I've seen people quit before they started working. I used to work on a construction crew that excavated pump house wells. We would dig holes about 25 feet by 25 feet and 30 feet deep. It is kind of scary to stand at the top of this hole and look down. Well, part of the job was going down in this hole to grade the ground and make sure it was the right depth and level all the way across. To do that, it meant you got your ass down there with a shovel and shoveled for the better part of the day to get the ground to where we needed it. I was in the bottom of this hole when 2 dudes showed up as general laborers on their first day. They asked the foreman what they'll be doing, and he points them to the hole. The 2 guys look down over the edge. I invite them down while standing in about 10 inches of mud, covered in dirt, and sweating my balls off. They look at each, shake their heads, nope, and walk back to their car and leave. Anyway, duck that job. I work at a desk now.